What does a freezing cold beach in Cornwall, some rocks, and the Commodore Plus 4 have in common? It's a ChinnyVision Summer Special. During the 1980s, any TV show worth its salt would decamp to the seaside for a summer special at some point. Whack-a-Day used to do it in any TV show, really. When things like Summertime Special, of course, would come from the seaside. So I thought, well, I'm in Cornwall, let's do one from the beach. And as you can see, the weather is absolutely lovely. The sun is out, it's 25 degrees, it's absolutely glorious. What we're going to be looking at is the Commodore Plus 4. Now, I don't have my Plus 4 with me, but I've recorded a load of footage beforehand, which I'm going to be viewing on my iPad. So we're going to have a look at that and talk through the Plus 4 if I can actually see the screen. The Commodore Plus 4 was an indirect replacement for the VIC-20. It's an enhanced Commodore 16. Instead of having 16K, it has 64K of RAM. The Plus 4 name refers to the fact it has 4 applications built in: a word processor, a spreadsheet, a database, and a graphing application. Commodore were aiming it as a kind of serious market, I guess, in that it had all these applications in, although in actual fact all the built-in applications were absolutely useless. Other than 64K of RAM, the built-in applications, it's pretty much the same as Commodore 16. It has the 121 colours and the 2-channel sound generator that the Commodore 16 has. The machine was pretty much a flop, really. Didn't take off either in America or in Europe, and a lot of the machines end up being dumped in Mexico, where it's sold up until the late 80s. The other problem with the Commodore 16 and the Plus 4 was originally the Commodore 64 was quite expensive, but the price came down fairly quickly. So what in fact ended up happening was there was no need to buy a C16 or a Plus 4 because the Commodore 64 got so much cheaper. This is my Commodore Plus 4. It's been refurbished by the Future Was 8-bit. I bought it and it basically bust as soon as I got it, and that's pretty much a common problem. The build quality on these things is legendarily bad. And I know the Future Was 8-bit had many problems fixing my machine. There were all sorts of different things going on, including a problem with the keyboard, and he ended up replacing the whole keyboard unit because it's on a ribbon cable that is extremely fragile and gets broken very, very easily. The machines also need recapping, and they're also susceptible to heat, so putting heat sinks on the chips inside is a useful thing to do. So thanks to the Future Was 8-bit, I got my machine back, and it's a very interesting machine to look at, really. But the Plus 4 has a really nice styling. It looks sleek, it's black, which is nice to see because it looks far less dated than some of the other designs. And as looking at the back here, you can see from left to right, we've got the power supply on the left there, and then we've got the serial port and the user port, which the SD2 IEC is plugged into. You then move over to the right hand side, you've got a joystick port and the video out, and you've got composite there and also S-video, which is quite nice if your TV can cope with that, although of course it's the non-standard Commodore S-video, so it's intended for Commodore monitors, and it's rather potluck if it's going to work with your TV. This is the power connector from the Plus 4. It's square like the Amiga, which is a little bit unfortunate because the replacements aren't easy to purchase. So even if you've got a bust Plus 4 power supply, it's worth saving that connector because you ain't going to get any new ones, and making up a new one, which is quite often you need to do with epoxy resin and messing around with the pins, is a pain. So keep your original connector even if your PSU is bust. These are the joystick ports. Commodore ostensibly decided that they were going to change from the standard Atari ports and put these little almost PS2 style ports in there. In fact, they're the same. They are PS2 ports in effect. Not pin compatible though. This was, Commodore claim, was to save space, although probably it was to try and flog some of their own brand joysticks. You can get an adapter for a few quid from eBay to plug in a normal Atari joystick. I've had mixed results with them. I had to cut mine down to make better contact because the one I bought was a little bit ropey and wasn't making good contact into that connector. Incidentally, the connectors on these machines do rust. So there's a little bit of plugging and unplugging to get this working. There's on the Commodore Plus 4 joysticks on the left, a horrible thing, and you've got a standard zip stick on the right. Very nasty, very plasticky, quite nice styling, actually quite intricate on it, but there's no steel shaft in it. It's going to be incredibly easy to break. And you can just see on the left hand side of the screen there the cursor keys on the Plus 4, and that mimics the style of the MSX. This is the SD2 IEC from the future as 8-bit, an essential purchase for your Plus 4. Enables you to plug in an SD card and load in every game ever fairly quickly. It's not instant because you're still going through the Commodore's serial port, but it works quite well. It got LEDs on the little buttons that do various things. It's fairly easy to use, and I think about £35, £40 to buy, which is incredibly good value for money, especially when you consider what the Commodore tape decks cost as well, because this thing will not run a standard Commodore 64 data set without an adapter, which is also incredibly hard to come by. So you've got to get the special Commodore 16 Plus 4 tape unit. That's expensive. You're much better off going to the future as 8-bit and buying an SD2 IEC instead. I hope the wind on this beach isn't blowing too much on my microphone. So here's the Plus 4 boot up screen. Different colour scheme from the Commodore 64. We're just going to boot up the menu from the SD2 IEC. So load FB, .8, and then we type run, and in a few seconds we'll have our menu system up. This card was provided ready to go by the future as 8-bit, so we're going to scroll down to the C16 Plus 4 menu, and it's not instant, but it's fairly quick, and you can go through and select all your games. There is a little gotcha in that it's limited to, and you can see the abbreviation there, to I think 8 or 9 characters on the file names, which is okay. Can be a little confusing when you've got games that have sequels and you're trying to work out which file is which, but it's nowhere near as bad as the div MMC enjoy on the Spectrum, where you've got hundreds of games on there and abbreviated file names, and you can't find games like Street Fighter 2 because there's so many games with the same start letters on there. This is our Fide Monty, one of the nicest Plus 4 ports actually. It's an exclusive Plus 4 port. It's not Commodore 16 game running on the Plus 4, because the Plus 4 can run the Commodore 16's back catalogue. And you've got some nice music, and it's looking very close to the Spectrum actually. And it is Alfredo Monti, as you'd know it from the Commodore 64, the Amstrad or the Spectrum. A little bit cut down. Bit of a tribute clash there that the machine suffers from. If you just want to know the absurdity of what I'm doing at the moment, I'm sitting on a beach and there's kids behind me running around with fishing nets to get crabbing. And the people look at me and going, what the hell is he doing? Well, never mind, we're going to soldier on. So it's Alfredo Monti, as you'd expect. To jump around, you collect the different objects. I mean, it's exactly as you'd expect. But it is very, very polished. It's a very nice port. There's not many Commodore Plus 4 exclusive Plus 4 owners have to put up with an awful lot of C16 games. And the machine's got lots of colours and fairly decent sound chip, so it's nice to see the full 64K of the Plus 4 being used. In short, Alfredo Monti is a very competent port for the Plus 4. There's also some unofficial ports for the Commodore Plus 4, and I'm not sure if this port of Elite is official or unofficial. Either way, it's interesting to note the Commodore Plus 4 runs faster than the Commodore 64, although the memory access, like the Electron, drags it back down to something closer to C64 speed, but this version of Elite runs very well. There's also a homebrew port of Barbarian that looks really good, apart from some very obvious nudity in the background there. But plays really well, nice sound effects, nice graphics, looks very close to the Amstrad version actually. It's none of all the browns of the Commodore 64 version. This is much more colourful. Unofficial ports of the Dizzy games, many of them from Eastern Europe. This is Magic Land Dizzy. No sound on this, and it's a little bit bugged, but it looks like it's been ported over from the Commodore 64. It looks pretty much identical. In fact, you can see the C64 version in grey. So yeah, this is a straight port from the C64, but gives Plus 4 owners who are starved of good games a Dizzy game to play with. There's lots of this Fantasy World Dizzy and many of the other Dizzy games to play as well. Dizzy Prince of the Yoke Folk is another one that made it across. There is a bit of a respawning problem when you die, You don't it can sometimes throw you back a few screens or respawn you in the wrong place. It is slightly bugged. Most Plus 4 owners would have had to put up with C16 ports, so we're going to have a look at a few of those. And this is the C16 version of Paperboy that I wasn't able to run the other week when I reviewed Paperboy. So have a quick look at this. It's a little bit blocky, a little bit slow and very basic, but this has all been done in 16K, remember. I mean, it's easy to criticise this, but, 16K. I've sent emails that are longer than 16K, even when you've got all the extra stuff stripped out. So this is a huge achievement to achieve Paperboy in such a small amount of memory. It's not a version you're going to choose to play, but if you've got your C16 or Plus 4 out, it's certainly worth a blast. One thing to look out for on the C16 and Plus 4 are the Mastertronic games. Mastertronic published a lot of games for the C16 and, of course, by default, the Plus 4 as well. They realised that these machines have been dumped on the market in the UK and Europe cheaply, and lots of kids ended up with them. Sometimes when they asked for C64s, the parents have bought them C16s and Plus 4s by accident for Christmas. And Mastertronic realised there was a big old market there, and they made lots and lots of games right up until about 89 for the C16 and Plus 4, many of which never came out on other formats, which makes it suddenly an incredibly interesting format to take a look at, especially if you like your Mastertronic games. I'm just going to look at a few of them, and this is one that everyone knows in the Commodore 64. It's Kickstart, but it's completely different from the Commodore 64 version and the other versions. Much smaller sprite. Reminds me a little bit of, there's a game on Spectrum that you have a motorbike and you ride through the caves, and its name escapes me. But it's a really fun little game. It's not Kickstart as you'd expect, but I found myself playing this again and again and again. You've got to collect the balloons, jump over things. Very basic, but incredibly good fun. Being good value for money for your $1.99 that you would have paid for it. As long as you're not expecting Kickstart from the Commodore 64, you're absolutely going to love this. Video Meanies is a slightly rubbish title, and perhaps you might think it's a Space Invaders clone. It's not. It's a peculiar thing. We've got to go through the screens and deactivate these computers. And high-res graphics here on the Commodore 16. I know this is running on a Plus 4, but it's a C16 game. You go around the screens, you shoot the baddies, you collect the keys, and you have to touch those computer things, that yellow thing on the left-hand side there, to deactivate it. Lots of screens to explore, quite a considerable amount of challenge here. Don't let the rubbish title put you off. Big Mac was one of Mastertronic's best-selling games. I think it's in one of their top 20 selling games of all times, which is impressive considering I don't believe this was ported to any other system. In fact, people could correct me on that. Big Mac, and there's a follow-up game as well. And I'm not sure which one this is. I think this is More Adventures of Big Mac, actually. I don't have the casing with me. I do have this on tape to check. But it's a Jet Set Willy clone, in effect. You have your Big Mac, the mad maintenance man, and you have to go round between the levels, completing each screen one at a time. I say Jet Set Willy, it's actually more Manic Miner, come to think of it, because you're tackling it one screen at a time. You can't go between the rooms. The graphics are incredibly rudimentary, but also very colourful. And I think this is really good fun. Anyone who likes a Manic Miner style game is really going to enjoy Big Mac. There's actually, I'd say it's perhaps a little bit better than Manic Miner. People might consider that heresy, I don't know. But you've got a bit more of a challenge. It's actually almost become slightly Hunchback on some of these levels, where you've got to jump over the chasms and avoid the things that fly. I don't know what that X thing flying past here, but if we time this right now, and that's incredibly Hunchback-like. So it's Manic Miner, Hunchback, and yeah, it's highly derivative of other games of the era, but it does it incredibly well. It's a fun game. Powerball is another Mastertronic game for the C16 and Plus 4. you bounce along. It's almost a 2D Impossible that you might remember from the Spectrum, Commodore and Amstrad. It's not a bad game. I found it a little bit fiddly. I can't get on with Whizball. I don't like the bouncing around, and I found this just a little bit fiddly. But I know people do like these games, so it's probably something worth checking out if you do like this kind of gaming mechanic. Again, colourful graphics, really nice. I mean, you've got 121 colours on the C16 and Plus 4, and these games really do use them. And you get some really colourful games that are quite well presented, especially when, I know we're running this on the Plus 4, all these games are running in 16K, and that's tiny. I did type-ins for my Amstrad that were bigger than 16K, and these games are really, really impressive. So rounding up the C16 and Plus 4 from this beach in Cornwall on ChinnyVision, the C16 and Plus 4, well, if you like the styling of the Plus 4, that's the machine to get, although bear in mind it is super unreliable, so make sure you get a working machine. The C16 is a perfectly viable alternative if you don't want to play the few Plus 4 exclusive titles. Do of course make sure you've got a way of playing with joysticks with an adapter or an original Plus 4 joystick, because you won't be plugging your Atari style joystick into a C16 or Plus 4. Do get an ST2 IEC from the future as 8-bit. It is a fantastic addition to your collection. You'll have every C16 and Plus 4 game in existence at your fingertips. It's easy to use. You can still collect tapes and stick them on your shelf. You just have instant access, and what more could you want? They're both nice machines to collect for. You've got all those Mastertronic games. I do strongly recommend, if you've got the common machines, the Spectrum, Commodore and Amstrad, the C16 and Plus 4 is the next step to look at, because you've got so much to look at and play with on these systems.